I'm beginning to film. Always keep eye contact with me, don't look at the camera. So
You have to speak louder.
I will. Today is the 10th of December, 2017.
Yes.
We're in Savyon, Rehov Kerem Hazeitim Stein, number 2, with Muriel Arens.
Yes.
And your maiden name?
My maiden name was Muriel Eisenberg.
Muriel Eisenberg. Okay. So Muriel, tell me where you were born and when you were born, and what kind of house you grew up in.
I was born in New York City. Just a minute. You want my birthday?
Yeah, like when were you? Yeah.
November 20th, 1929.
November 30th. Wow. So
20th.
20th. So you were born right after the Wall Street crash.
Yes.
Tough
A month
times.
later.
Tough times.
I asked my father about that.
Okay. And what did he say?
He said, I wasn't a bit worried. I didn't have any stocks.
Where were you born?
I was born in the Bronx, New York,
Where?
in a private hospital.
What neighborhood did you grow up in?
We lived opposite the zoo in Pelham Parkway. No, you could just say Pelham Parkway.
Pelham Parkway?
Yes.
Okay. And you, what kind of family, where were your parents from? Where were they born? And what were their names?
They were Abe and Minnie Eisenberg. My mother came to the United States when she was a little girl. And my father came in 1919, immediately after the First World War.
Where did he come from?
They were first cousins, and they came from, when they were born, it was Austro-Hungary.
Okay. Okay.
I think when they left, it was Romania.
So where were they from? Where were your parents born? Where were they from?
They were from different towns.
But they were first cousins.
It was a town where
Do you remember the name?
I don't want to go into that.
Okay.
Everybody was a first. I think.
I'm just asking about the town that they came from.
No, they came from different towns,
Different
right
towns.
next to each other. I visited there.
Yeah, is it, because my family is from, I think maybe the same area. My family's from a city called Chernovitz.
Chernovitz.
Is that the same?
That was the city.
Really?
Yeah.
Because that's where my family's from.
But they came from a small town. They came from small town.
Chernovitz is today
Was
is
the-
in the Ukraine. Then it was in the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Right.
And after
And
the
then
First
was
World War,
Romania.
it was Romania.
Right.
Yeah.
So my mother and father and many of the relatives I noticed who lived there for hundreds of years, they married each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's
My grandmother and grandfather were first cousins.
first cousins also. Now, your father, did he fight in the First World War? Was he?
At the end of the First World War, he was drafted. But my grandfather, who had 9 children, was a soldier in the First World War.
On the Austro-Hungarian side?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And your father himself, at the end of the war, he was
At the end of the war, he was the
drafted.
oldest son.
Mm-hmm.
He was drafted,
He was
but
drafted.
for a short time, I think.
And then after after
Then
the
he
war,
left.
he left.
Yes.
And he-
There was a sister in America, and she brought them over.
Interesting. So
She was brought over by her uncle. They started coming in from that family. They started coming, I think, in 1880, 1890.
my family left Chernovitz in the 1890s, late 1890s. That's where I get my eyes and my nose from the side of Chernovitz. And I was there a few years ago. I went to go look
I
for
was
some
there
graves.
too. It's a university town.
Yes, it is. And that's where the Tnuat HaSkala started also. It was a very, Chernovitz is a very famous city for Jewish intellectualism.
It was 60% Jewish, they said, before the war.
A lot of culture, a lot of literature, mixed with...
Because they were leaving the small towns, which were agricultural. My grandfather had a big farm.
Yeah.
I have a picture of his house.
Mm-hmm.
And the young people were leaving, and they were going, they would have liked to go abroad, but it was very difficult. So they went to the big cities. They wanted a different life. They wanted...
Now, your father arrives in America in 1919. Your
Yes.
mother had already come earlier.
No, my mother came... No, actually she came... Her father came in 1911. And he wanted them... those were good times. He had money. He made money. He wanted them to come immediately. My grandmother wanted him to come back. She didn't want to leave her family. While the letters were going back and forth, she already agreed, but the war broke out, and she was left with 3 children, 1, 3, and 5, alone.
In Europe.
In Europe. With no, he couldn't send money there because it was the German side.
Yeah.
She was an amazing woman.
What was her name? Minnie?
Excuse me?
Minnie. Her name was Minnie? Oh, your grandmother.
My grandmother.
Your
She
grandmother.
came to America. She was around till I was till I was married.
Wow.
She saw the great-grandchildren.
Amazing. Amazing.
But she did it. And we always gave her a lot of credit.
Sure.
We thought very highly of her.
She was kind of like a patriarch.
That she could manage. Her sister helped her.
And are you an only child?
No, I have another sister.
So is she older or younger than you?
Younger.
Younger than you. Okay, so okay.
5 years younger.
5 years younger. So your mother and father, they get married a few years before you were born, or what was your father's profession when he came to the United States?
What was his profession? Dry goods.
Dry good.
He was a salesman.
Nice.
He could sell, they said he could sell snow to the Eskimo.
Or holy water to the Pope. Dry goods. Did he have a store?
That was not the chief thing that he did. He was a humanitarian.
We'll get to that in a second, but did he have a store or did he have a cart that he...
No, he didn't have a store. He worked in the same store until he retired when he was 72.
Unbelievable.
He made them what they are.
So he worked for somebody who owned the shop?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
because he didn't work on Saturday.
Right.
So down on the east side, they were closed on Saturday, and Sunday was the day that people who had stores would come down and buy their merchandise.
Yeah. And the shop that he worked in was, of course, it was in the Bronx.
No, it was on the east side,
On
Lower
Manhattan.
East Side.
Lower East Side.
Yeah,
Okay, that's where my grandparents...
downtown.
That's where my grandparents were born.
They
My
were-
grandparents were born... My grandmother was born on Broome Street. And my grandfather was born on East Broadway in Essex. Very close.
Well,
Lower East Side.
Essex was the big market.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember the gypsies sitting on the sidewalk.
Really?
Yes, and my mother said to me, she used to frighten me. She held my hand, and she said, "You know, they steal children." And it never occurred to me that there were people that stole children. What a thing to tell a child. Because maybe in Europe they did that.
Yeah.
There were gypsies where they lived.
Listen, my mother...
Did you ever hear of a gypsy story? Did your grandma?
Yeah, not my grandmother. My mother used to tell me, she'd say to me, Joshua, if you don't behave, I'm going to sell you to the gypsies. Or the gypsies are going to come take you away. Something like that.
Right. They were the boogeyman.
Exactly. I've heard that many, many times. And tell me, what kind of house are you brought up in? Is it a religious house? Is it modern Orthodox?
Modern Orthodox.
So you're keeping Shabbat?
But my grandparents were Haredim, and I spent a lot of time with them. But actually, my father was sending me to, my father was a good Jew, and he was sending me to Hebrew school and Yiddish school, and I can read and write Yiddish. I have nobody to talk to anymore. I'm forgetting it.
Do you know that this is totally out of the topic, but there is in Israel today a Yiddish theater in Tel Aviv.
Yes, I know.
And my friend is one of the star actors there. So if you want to go to a show, you tell me.
But by the way, everybody speaks a different kind of Yiddish.
That's true.
People don't understand when they say they speak Yiddish, I say something.
You know who was a very famous Jew who came from the Bronx?
Yes, who?
He was definitely older than you, about 2 generations older than you. Hank Greenberg.
Who?
Hank Greenberg,
Oh,
the baseball player.
oh right, he
from
wouldn't
the
play
Bronx.
on Yom
He
Kippur.
wouldn't play, no, that was Sandy Koufax. He wouldn't play on Rosh Hashanah.
Well, that was a different time.
Yes, but Hank Greenberg was also from the Bronx.
Because their parents probably were immigrants
Sure. So you're growing up in a modern Orthodox house?
Right.
Hold on.
About
We're going to talk a little
the
bit.
old days.
We're getting warmed up. So in your house, you keep the Sabbath when you're growing up?
Yes.
Okay. Kosher house, synagogue on Friday, Saturday.
No, synagogue. My father used to daven at home every morning.
Uh-huh.
And then he started, when he got older, he started going to the synagogue. He was a joiner. If there was a synagogue there, he was the gabbai. During the war, he organized a relief organization for the people back in Bukovina. Bukovina was where they came from.
Bukovina is the region.
Bukovina is the region,
and
right.
The capital of Bukovina is Chernovitz.
And northern Bukovina was in the hands of the Russians.
Yes.
And there was a big difference by the way they were treated historically. Southern Bukovina was in the hands of the Germans.
Is there any in the...
I learned all this here, by the way.
Yeah.
I was never interested.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now tell me, you're growing up in the Bronx.
Yeah.
In the 30s and 40s, you're really kind of growing
When I
up.
was 10, we moved to Inwood.
Oh, sure. Okay.
That's Upper Broadway.
That's already Manhattan.
Yes.
Yeah, that's like...
That's where I went to junior high.
Washington Heights.
It's north of Washington
It's
Heights.
like north of Washington Heights. It's
Right.
really like, yeah.
It's American Jewish. Washington Heights was like German Jewish.
Okay.
A lot of refugees
A lot
there.
of refugees. So when you're 10, you move to Manhattan, Upper Manhattan.
Yes.
Now, your sister's born 5 years after you. Her name, please, for the record.
Sheila.
Sheila Eisenberg.
Yes. Sheila E. Eisenberg.
E. Eisenberg. The E is for...
She thought she's a realtor, and she
Okay.
thought that was more appropriate
More appropriate.
for her business.
That
must be the trend.
Is there any? We're going to get to the war very soon. That it starts to come. But is there any political affiliation in the house that you grew up in? Is there any like talk about Zionism, about none? Just
Judaism.
Just Judaism. Okay. Do you have any memories as a child of any anti-Semitism towards you when you were growing up?
Never. As a matter of fact, all our teachers in elementary school were Irish. Miss A. O'Connor, Miss B. O'Connor. They were very nice. I never remember any incidents. Then later on, the teachers became Jewish.
Sure.
It depends on the Aliyah when they came.
Right.
The Jewish teachers were married, but the Irish teachers were unmarried.
All single.
That I noticed.
That you noticed, yeah.
And I'm sure I know why. They
Why?
couldn't find anyone on their level.
On their level, yeah. That would be Irish
among the
Catholics.
men.
Yeah.
Whereas the women who were educated, the Jewish women,
Sure.
there were a lot of blacks
Mm-hmm.
with all kinds of problems. And a very dear friend of mine was black, and I met her again in college. And my mother let me go to her house, which she never let me go to any. We lived in a neighborhood, well, every neighborhood, there was a black neighborhood and there was a white neighborhood.
right.
But there was a house across the way where there were blacks.
Uh-huh.
And she was lovely, that girl. You know, when I think of it, she lived with her aunt. We're talking now when I'm 5 years old. And her aunt told me that when she grew up, the mother was a seamstress. That was considered a
Sure.
good
A good profession.
a good house.
Absolutely.
Right. Very nice people. And her aunt lived with her mother's sister, and she told me that when she grew up, she was going to leave the United States and go to live in, what's the name of that country that was, Tubman was the president. There was a black country that was run by blacks.
Liberia.
American blacks.
Liberia.
Yeah, American blacks.
They went back. They were taken from...
That was the first time I remember. I was a little girl, and I remember thinking that she was ready to leave her family and to go to Africa. I knew about Africa.
The country's called Liberia.
That was the first time I ever heard of black Zionism.
The Black Zionism, yeah.
I never heard of it again, by the way. Then they just wanted their place in the United States.
Yeah.
They never talked about that country. I wonder what happened to it.
Liberia still exists.
Yes.
And Liberia is a country that was formed by
American blacks.
slaves who went back there and now in the late 30s. Do you ever remember any conversation around you with your parents about what's happening in Europe before the war breaks out?
Oh, that's all they talked about. In the early 30s, I will tell you, I sat down one day and made a list of the families that my father and my Uncle Joe Scharf sponsored and brought to America, and I'll tell you how they did it.
Please.
There were 32 families. My grandmother on my mother's side, her family lived in Germany. When our family went to the States, they went to Germany. Germany was the most prosperous country in Europe.
Sure.
And you didn't even need any, they just went, you know. And they all lived there and prospered there. My father was on a trip back home in 1928, and he stopped off there. He was engaged to my mother, and he stopped off there, although they were his relatives too, but more distant. And he told us how they were living and how well they were doing. But he was with a friend who looked very Jewish. I don't know what that means after living in Israel, but we knew in America what it meant. And he said the kids were running after them in the street and yelling terrible things at this friend of his. They knew German. They knew Yiddish, so I guess they knew German.
Yeah.
And when my father came into the house, this was in 1928, he came into the house of his cousin there, my mother's cousin. He said, what is going on here? He said, this doesn't exist in New York. She said, oh, don't pay any attention. It's just those bad kids, you know, those hoodlums. When they walked in the street, they were running after this man and calling him a terrible name. In 28.
Before Hitler even came to power.
My father came back, he reported that. He noticed it. And in 1933 came, I guess, a request. They wanted to leave. The Gestapo was already coming. And the ones who were well off, they could get certificates. In 33, they could still go. And they left, and then the wives came afterwards with the kids. They came to part of them came to Palestine.
Sure.
But the ones that wanted to come to the States, my grandmother's brother was very ill, and his daughter lived in the States. He wanted to come and stay with her. And then the others saw that it worked. My uncle was, maybe I shouldn't say this, the hotel doesn't exist. Did you ever hear of the Hotel Astor?
Near Astor
in New
place?
York? Astor.
No. Where was it?
It was on Times Square.
Okay. So
It was very well known. Everybody would meet under the clock in the
Did he work
Hotel
there,
Astor.
or he-
He was a manager there.
Okay, and?
He had quite a big job there, and he would write letters from the hotel, set on hotel stationery with a stamp, saying that they had openings in certain departments and they needed help because the guy had to have a certificate saying he had a job in order to go.
Sure.
This was in 33. I know because, first of all, I was a little girl and I used to go everywhere with my father on Saturdays. And I went with him several times to Rockefeller Center, where the immigration department was. And I saw my father was making out papers. He and my uncle took over 32 families from Germany in 33, 34. So immediately they...
And your uncle was the guy who worked at the Astor Hotel, is that
Right,
correct?
he was a manager.
And his name, Joe?
I give Joe Scharf,
Yeah, okay.
but don't.
I just want to know who the name
Yes.
of the person is, that's all. Yeah,
He was really my father's uncle,
okay.
but I just
Yeah.
explained that
Yeah.
everybody's related.
So they were very active in helping.
They were the shakers and doers in the family, and this is what my father did on his free time, on his lunch hour. And I saw all this. Sometimes I went with him.
And apparently
It was very interesting.
And apparently it had
I had a
a
very
big effect.
interesting childhood.
it had a very big impact on you also, apparently.
I'll tell you something else. I'm sure that other families were doing it.
Yeah.
And there was no HIAS, so everybody, HIAS is the Immigrant Aid Society, which was formed later, I don't know exactly when, but when they saw they couldn't stay on there, the Jews, that they had to leave. They told the kids couldn't go to school anymore.
After 35, after the Nuremberg laws, it got very bad.
I don't know exactly,
Yeah.
because I was a little girl, and I used to tag along with first of all, what everybody did was to take a kid and divide them up as they came, and until the parents got settled, until they found work. They all started working at the Hotel Astor, by the way. Once I heard a cousin of mine say it was a crummy job. I couldn't believe my ears. He should have kissed my uncle. My uncle saved his life. He said it was a crummy job. He expected them to make him the head of the hotel. That's what Jews are like sometimes, you know? They don't... I can't say many people said thank you to my father, but the good ones did.
So your father and his uncle were very active in bringing...
They brought 32 families.
From Germany, who were originally from Bukovina, who left Bukovina.
No, some of them were Germans. I mean, they married Germans already.
Yeah. And you're a very young child when this happens. Do you remember this? Do you remember?
But I used to go with him, and he used to talk about it. Okay. And then he used to bring them, they used to sleep in my bed. And I didn't like it. I was 3, I didn't like it. I told my mother once when they weren't there that I didn't like having people sleeping in my bed. So she said to me, listen, we're Jewish and they're Jewish, and they had to leave their homes because they were Jews like us. That's the first time I found out what it means to be a Jew. I didn't even know. And she said, and we've got to help them. In other words, keep quiet. And I never said anything again. I just told that story to the daughter of the person who slept in my bed, my cousin Annie. She never knew that I didn't like it, but I told the story, and she thought it was a very nice story. And she came one day when she was visiting Israel, and she came to visit me after I broke my ankle. She came to the rehab place.
Uh-huh.
I said, you heard the story? She said, yes.
Now, I'm going to speed up a few years. Do you remember Kristallnacht? Do you remember hearing about Kristallnacht? The night of, do you remember?
I had a friend in school, Anne Berenger, her name was. She came to visit me in Israel. By this time, my husband was very prominent, and all the girls, my friends there, were talking about it, about me, that I stayed in Israel. I lived in Israel, and who my husband was. She came to my house, and she said, you know, we came to America after Kristallnacht. She said they jailed my father. They put my father into jail. And she was the class athlete, I remember. She loved athletics. And she spoke with an accent. So she came in 38, 39. They happened to have family in New York who were very prosperous, and they had pull. And somehow they got them out. That was pretty late already, and they got them into the States. When her father got out of jail, he was in Dachau. And she she never said a word all those years. She was in my class, never said a word. Why she came, when she came. So we had a bit of everything there.
Do you remember when the Second World War started?
Yes.
In 1949?
I was at home ironing. On Sunday I did the ironing for my mother.
You were 10 years old.
I was ironing, and when my mother came home, she was visiting a friend, she saw me standing there ironing, crying.
You were crying?
Yes. She said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Didn't you hear the news?" She said, "Yes." So she says, "But why are you crying?" I said, "Because wars are terrible things. A lot of people are going to get killed." That's all. We just had the anniversary. And a lot of people got killed, of our soldiers, American soldiers.
Well, America wasn't in the war yet, but it took another 2 years.
But when I was 10,
Yeah.
I wrote there was a contest in New York City, in New York State. No, it was in the city, with 20, I don't know, very few winners about the situation. This was before America went into...
Sure.
There was an America First Party, remember? And there was... And of course, we were all for America going into... The people on the East Coast
Yeah.
were all for America going into the war.
And the West Coast?
The West Coast, I don't...
Well, because you had the people who were against America going into the war, like Lindbergh and all those people who...
Well, that was the
isolations.
middle... That was the middle...
Yeah.
Well, there were three parties, right? And then the Japanese did this terrible thing.
Well, that's December.
That was the first thing.
That's
I
Pearl
heard that they sunk the fleet.
Where were you? Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
I was at home ironing.
No, you said you were at home ironing when the war broke out in Europe in 1939.
No. The war went Pearl Harbor.
Okay, so
That time.
you were already like 12 years old. Yeah.
I don't know how old.
Yeah. 41.
But when I was 10, I won a contest already saying the United States should go into the war on the side of the Allies.
On the side of the Allies. Yeah.
They were already lend-leasing ships and doing things. A 10-year-old kid, and you know, the contest was for children from 9 to 16. And I won there was a banquet at the Hotel Astor. My father and my uncle were peeking from the side. My father took a day off from work to take me there. I didn't travel on the subway. And I met the mayor, and I spoke.
Who was the mayor at the time? Do you remember?
I don't remember. It was in 1940.
Okay. Maybe LaGuardia?
I don't remember. No, it wasn't LaGuardia. Maybe it was the guy after him. And I was on the radio.
And your
I still
essay was about how America should join the war effort.
should get into the war now and help the Allies, because sooner or later we're going to have to do. This fellow is a maniac, and I don't know, I wrote whatever I wrote.
I wonder if you still have that essay.
I probably have it among my thing. And I won $25 too.
Wow.
It was a lot in those days.
So did you have a talent for writing? Were you...
Well, I used to write pretty well. I used to write short stories. Listen, everybody whose favorite book was Little Women wanted to be Joe. Do you know the book Little Women by Louisa May Alcott? It was about 4 sisters, and one of them was Joe, and she wanted to be a writer.
Okay.
And that was everybody's favorite book at a certain age, 8. I used to try everything. That's the way I was. Anyway, I won that contest. Mayor shook his hand. I went to the banquet, made $25, and I felt pretty good. And most of all, I wanted to say that I think that America should go into the war. And that was 2 years before they did, or a year before they did.
And when Pearl Harbor happens in December 1941...
That was terrible. They sunk the whole Pacific Fleet.
Yeah. Yeah. 3,000 people dead.
And we didn't have anybody... Well, my aunt's sons were in the army, but everybody came out of it all right. But this thing was going on in Europe. That was the reason that I wrote. The Holocaust was starting in Europe. And that's why I wanted America to go in. I didn't say that.
Are you...
I said that Hitler...
Do you guys hear any news from Europe during the war about...
Nothing.
Just speculations and...
Nothing came through. My father, three of them were in America, and there were 9, so 6 were in Europe. And they were lucky, because they were sent to a camp. They didn't, well, I learned all the stories here. I can't explain it to you. I was not interested. Not really. Nobody talked. They didn't want to tell the children anything. They wouldn't even take a kid to a cemetery. So, and then here, that's all that people did was talk about their experiences.
Well, yeah, it took.
And when I was, okay, we'll come to, when I was in the army.
Wait. Here.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that very soon. We're just going to go chronologically. When did you graduate high school, Muriel?
I was 16. 1940. Let's see. I came in 48. I was 18.
So you graduated in 46.
Right.
In 1946. The war is over. World War II is over.
Right.
We know about the Holocaust. We know about the 6 million. We know about what's happening in Palestine with the British.
My father was bringing over his family.
From where?
He was busy. He brought my uncle and aunt directly from Romania. He found a rabbi who certified my uncle, as my uncle had some rabbinical training, certified him as a rabbi, and he came in as a rabbi from Romania.
To the States?
Yes. That was when I left.
You left in 46?
In 48, he already came back, he already came to America, one of my uncles.
One of your uncles.
And gradually, they came here, and from here, you could go to the States. And
yeah.
2 of them remained here. 2 of the brothers remained here. They didn't go to the States. And the rest went to the States, ultimately, after being here for a few years.
Now, when you graduate high school in 1946,
yes,
there's 2 years between 46.
I went to college.
Okay. Where did you go to college?
Hunter.
Hunter, okay. What did you study?
I was planning to settle in Israel. I belonged to Beitar.
Okay, so that's what I want to ask you.
Yes.
When did you start affiliating?
About 15.
Tell me about it.
My best friend was in Beitar, and she influenced me a lot. She left Beitar, but...
Her name? Do you remember?
Enid Rosenberg.
Okay.
She just died recently. She influenced me, and I had been going to all kinds of Jewish You know, young New York is full of
full of it. It's a hornet's nest.
Yes, I went to what was it? Young Judea. Too not enough for me. Until finally I came to Beitar.
Do you remember where their offices were in New York? Do you remember where you?
Well, I went to the Kingsbridge branch of Young Judea.
Where was that exactly?
That was in North.
Not Young Judea. I'm talking about Beitar.
Oh, Beitar.
Yeah.
Beitar was always never had any money, and they were always on the outs. You know, nobody. I remember there was a meeting place on 91st Street. It was in a synagogue or something. And I went to the summer camp that they had.
Oh, did you?
Yes, I was a counselor. And that was after Jabotinsky died.
Sure, Jabotinsky died in 40.
So this was after.
Yeah.
I was 15 when I started in Beitar.
And your mother and father had no problem with you going to Beitar?
No. No, they did. It was like anything I did.
Okay.
Every day I was doing something else.
And did you guys so you guys would meet in a synagogue on 99th?
First Street, I think.
91st on the east side or the west side?
West.
West side. And you felt at home there?
Yeah. I felt this was the kind of I don't know, I made friends there, although I brought a lot of my friends into it and they didn't stay. They were just too bad they didn't stay because all their kids married out. And they took it very much to heart. That was the generation that felt very bad about it. I don't know how they feel now.
And what are you guys doing in the youth movement? What are your activities? Are you?
Well, I used to. When I left, I wonder what those people thought. I went door to door in the neighborhood where I lived. There were a lot of Irish living there, so I had to think who was Jewish. And I rang the bell, and I went in and spoke to the mother, and I said, we're starting a group here of young Zionists, and we'd like to see, if you have children who are this age group, we would like them to come. We're going to talk about Jewish history, and I got a group together like that. I did that on my own. I mean, it was a suggestion, but I had a good group going until I left.
You had a group of people who were like kids who were younger than you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you were like 17,
Beitar
18?
Hatzira.
Did you learn any Hebrew there a little, or?
What?
Did you learn a little bit of Hebrew there?
We wanted to do that because we wanted to get the parents in on it.
Now, at the time that you're active in Beitar in New York, it's tensions here with the British are extreme.
I know that. So I was in a couple of demonstrations downtown where they threw water in pots, hot water on our heads. And I remember I had a date that night, that Saturday night, but I went to this demonstration first. And I was all dressed up in my best finery, and they threw something on my head. And I never went out with boys from Beitar. I went out with other boys. And I turned up, and this guy said to me, "What happened to you?" They hit me right in the head with this. That was in the British Armory, I remember.
The British Armory?
Armory. There is such a thing downtown. There used to be. And there were a lot of British soldiers there, and we had a demonstration. Some people got arrested, not me.
Who threw things on you, do you know?
Huh?
Who threw things on you? Who was throwing the things?
The British, the soldiers, or whoever was there.
Really?
Yeah. That was nothing. The Beitar was really organizing to bother the British. The other groups were not. They weren't, they were just like Hashomer Tzair and just sending groups over to settle. But we had this political outlook where they were there and we wanted them to get out because they wouldn't let any Jews in. And we knew when, I'll tell you, I left on a ship that left May 4th, 1948.
May 4th.
To go to Israel. I thought it was going directly to Israel. Everything was hush hush. I was very naive.
What were you going there as?
I was going there to help.
Help.
Help. That's all.
What did your parents think about it?
I ran away from home. It's the only thing I ever did that was a little out of the ordinary.
You ran away from home when you were 18 years old.
All my friends helped. Nobody came. They never showed up. They went to the going away party, and
You had a going away party?
there were a whole bunch of girls that were supposed to go. They told their parents. I knew if I told my parents, I would be they would have me arrested. So I didn't do anything. I just went. I gave a suitcase to one of my friends. She took it out the night before, little suitcase, and that's it.
So you snuck out of the house, basically.
No, I went to school. I took my books.
And didn't you know that you were going to see your parents for a while, or?
I left a letter.
Okay. And what did you write?
I guess I said, in April, the Arabs were getting ready to attack. They were already getting ready. 5 Arab countries were getting ready to attack Israel. And I want to help. What could I say? I left school. I had a Regent scholarship.
Did you have a passport?
Huh? One of my friends signed for my passport. I had a passport. Everything was done by me.
So did you leave legally?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was 18.
You had a passport, you left legally. And your okay, so you leave on May 4th, 1948, is that?
And the state was not yet established.
No.
But the Arabs had attacked.
Sure. Well, the War of Independence officially started after Kafted November. And
It really started in April.
In partition. When the partition happened in 47.
Yeah, but the real fighting started in April.
In April. And
I read that. And
now, do you remember the name of the ship that you boarded?
yes, the Marine Carp. And for that I was interviewed. You can look up and Google.
Okay.
Because of this secrecy surrounding it, I couldn't ask any questions. I thought we were going directly from New York to Haifa.
But?
Very naive of me. It was an ordinary, it was a troop ship converted to a cruise.
Who were the people?
It took 2 weeks.
How many people were on the ship?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. It was full of young people, mostly men, and all members of youth movements. For the same reason as Beitar, they moved up the when they were going to leave. You know, in Shomer Sair, and they have target dates when they're going to leave. A year from now, 2 years from now, because they were all students. So I was studying something for plant breeding, and I was just getting into Cornell to study that. When my professor of botany, funny, the week before, she said to me, I can get you a complete scholarship for a PhD. I was then finishing my second year. She said, at the University of Wisconsin, which is the best place to study what you're interested in.
What was the topic of your studies again?
Plant breeding.
Plant breeding.
Yes,
Okay.
what we have, the different colored, I thought that was a good thing. And I thought about it, and I thought I want to study this, and I want to go to Palestine when I finish, when I'm ready. Here they told us we have to leave because everybody's in the army, and we have to take the place of the people who are still at home. And I don't know what in Beitar they didn't tell us that. They told us we have to go and help. So I left school. That was a very difficult decision for me. And then this thing with the scholarship turns up a week before I have to leave.
Yeah, that's big. That's huge. PhD.
Well, I had very high marks all the time.
You were a good student.
Very. Top. In every school that I went to. And anyway, so I had made up my mind, and that was that. And I left, and of course I broke my mother's heart.
We'll get to that in a sec, but what I want to know is, on May 4th, you leave New York.
Yes.
Harbor. And where do you guys stop?
The next stop was Greece. And someone told me that my parents were trying, I had a cousin who was an immigration lawyer, and the rumor was that they were going to take me off in Greece.
Off the boat.
And they thought about it, and apparently they said something about it, and my mother said, she said, if I take her off, she'll never forgive me. And she said, and she's never even washed out a pair of stockings in her life. She said, Palestine is a tough place. She's not going to last there. That's what she said. And there is something in what she said. She thought I was going to come right back. So they didn't do anything. And the next stop was Beirut. And in Beirut, the Arabs took over the ship. It was the 15th. Listen to this. The 15th, there was a party because we found out that the state of Israel, yes, had.
And you're on the ship.
And all of a sudden, a guy stands up and he says, I'm the leader of the Haganah on this ship. You're going to listen to it. You're going to obey my orders. Listen, I almost fainted. He said, I said, how could I be so naive that they would, and the ship was full of guns for Israel.
Okay, so the ship was full of ammunition.
I don't know whether you should say this.
It's fine. All these ships have
full.
Full and also a lot
full.
of them.
And the girl standing next to me said, you know what I have under my name? She said, I was flabbergasted because in Beitar, they kept us out of everything. And all we knew is this organization, Land and Labor, started by Teddy Kollek, was a perfectly legal thing, and we were just going to Palestine, that's all.
So what happened with this guy on the ship, on the Hag?
So they started to search the ship. Anyway, they searched and searched and searched and searched and searched and found nothing.
Where is this?
In Beirut, Lebanon. The Arabs.
The Lebanese.
And the American consul was with them. And he said, that's what I said on Google. He said, Moses was a greater, they took off, they said they were going to remove the men from the ship because they were going to Palestine to fight. The war was already on. It had started in April. And there were 69 young men aboard the ship. And right away I found out who they were and where they were coming from. Some of them were from the youth movements. Some of them were just Americans who volunteered. And there were non-Jews there too. And they removed them from the ship. They came with army trucks and they took them. And I saw when they were going, I thought, we're never going to see them again. I gave the Lebanese more credit than they deserved, because they just put them in a camp and they didn't harm them. They sent them back to the States.
Really?
And they never found anything on the ship. And the Arabs who were armed, heavily armed, told the radio operator that he must not send anything out on the radio about what happened. And the American consul came on the boat, and he said, when they took those boys, I said, these young men, they just served in the American army in the war. I said, what right? And he was he was from the State Department. He was on the side of the Arabs, not of the Americans that were being removed. I said, they have no right to take them off an American boat. He said, listen, he said, Moses was a greater guy than anyone here, and he didn't make it to Palestine either. What do you think of that? And I still remembered his name for the Google, and I gave his name for that.
Remember his name?
He's probably dead by now.
Remember his name though?
No, now I don't remember it anymore.
Why did the boat stop in Beirut? Why?
Because it was just a passenger boat. It took on people everywhere. It took on Greeks that were going to the States.
Okay, gotcha. So it was like
I didn't know what it was.
It was a commercial ship. It wasn't like the Exodus or the...
No.
It was a totally...
Right.
But it
Pay as you go.
But there were weapons on there.
That's true. That was illegal.
Yeah, but they never...
I didn't know that.
And they didn't find it in Beirut. They didn't find the weapons.
Listen, the next stop was Haifa.
Okay.
And the British were leaving.
Right.
But they were still in Haifa.
Sure.
So I said, here it comes again. First of all, we went along the coast from
Beirut to
Haifa, from Beirut to Haifa. They had the whole British fleet trying to keep these poor refugees out of, it was disgusting. I thought they were disgusting. I said, I bet they're those Lend-Lease ships that I wrote that article about. And that was their job, to keep the Jews out of the remnants, Sharit Plita, they call them.
Sharit Plita.
Yes, to keep them out of the...
Do you remember
And then they were deporting them already to Cyprus.
To Cyprus.
Yeah.
What date did you arrive in Haifa? Do you remember the date? The date? What the date was?
The
May?
16th.
The 16th of May,
16th of
1948.
May,
So you arrive
1948.
on it's
After.
Shabbat. It's the day after the declaration.
Yes.
Shabbat. It was just
No, wait a minute. I arrived in Beirut. No, 16th of April I arrived
May.
in Israel. May.
May, the day after the declaration.
Right.
You get off, you're in Haifa.
No, the British are there. They start searching the boat. They search and search. And you know what I thought? I said, it's not possible that the British didn't find anything. I said, I think, this is my opinion, they're just fed up and they'd like to get out of here. They didn't find anything. They didn't say anything. They didn't I spoke to the radio operator and he sent out the news. I said to him, listen, they threatened him, not to do anything. I said, they won't do anything to you. I had no information about that. And he sent out the news, and the next day, all the names of everybody were in the New York Times.
Of the guys that were taken off.
Of the guys who were taken off. And the people who were on the boat. They had the whole manifest there. So my math teacher called up my mother. She never had any contact with any of my teachers. He said, was that Muriel who got the scholarship? He was my mentor. My mother. Anyway, that was it?
You arrive on May 16th, 1948.
Yes, and
where's the first place you go to?
I go up on the Carmel, on Mount Carmel, to some kind of a place, and they have first of all, I stand and wait. Someone was supposed to meet me from Beitar, meet us. Well, no one showed up. I was standing there all by myself. And all the boys had been taken away, including the guy who was going to take us to Beitar. And Beitar was an illegal organization. I'm waiting there, so the guy from Land and Labor sees me at 11 o'clock at night standing there on the pier. He says, so what are you doing here? Everybody else was taken away by their organization.
Yeah.
I said, someone was supposed to come and get me and they didn't come. So he said, okay, he said, we'll take care of you, Land and Labor. And he took me to a hostel for immigrant women. And I stayed there overnight. And since I knew English, the next day they found me a job. I worked for Cable and Wireless. That's the British. You see, they cut off the telephone and the post, the British. There was no contact. So, but Cable and Wireless was their company, and all the newspaper men you could imagine were there in Haifa in that Cable and Wireless place, sending out their copy. In a way, it was very interesting for me. I met Arthur Kessler. I met other people that I was familiar with their books. Because all the time I was working, someone would come up and say, oh, guess who just came in to send the copy out? And that's what I did until I did find someone from Beitar, and they said there's nothing they can do with me because I don't speak Hebrew. So I said, so what do you want me to do? I'm here. They said, join the army. So the next day I joined the army. And then they put me in the Air Force because that's the only place where they spoke English. But in the Air Force, I was a radar operator. And at that time, they had radar. I'm sure now they've got one station for the whole country. But then they had them all over, right? They had a unit, and they were girls. By the way, then the army was separate. The girls and the men were separate. Now they're together. So all the other girls who spoke English were refugees.
From Europe?
From Romania, Bulgaria, because some of them were still going to school at a certain point, and they were studying English.
Yeah.
So and everyone had a story, and everybody told me a story.
What was your job in the Air Force?
As a radar operator, I had to watch these blips on the screen. When I saw something coming, that was it wasn't our plane.
Right.
It was their plane. And sometimes when I was in Herzliya in their station, I could hear the alarm going off in Tel Aviv. So I started looking on my screen because I knew that how far was Herzliya from Tel Aviv. I knew they're coming here next.
And did it ever happen that you spotted enemy aircrafts?
Well, they were bombing.
Yeah.
And when I was, I had a room they arranged when I was in cable and wireless.
Where was your Air Force base in?
The main base was then in Jaffa.
In Jaffa, that you were at.
That's where I got my training.
Okay, I interviewed a gentleman who unfortunately passed away about a year and a half ago, named David Makarov. Mac. He was one of the guys who trained people to do radar. Makarov. David Makarov.
He could have been the...
Small guy with glasses.
I know.
He was originally...
My commander was a woman.
Okay, well, do you remember
from Canada.
Do you remember her name?
She had actually done this work in the army.
In the Canadian World
in the World War II.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't remember.
And your army, in your Air Force base where you were stationed most of the time, it was in Jaffa?
Not most of the time.
Because you were traveling
I
around
was
a lot.
trained in Jaffa. That was headquarters.
Right.
And I was all over. They had a station on Mount Carmel. They had one in Givat Olga, near Hadera. Now it's a town. They had one in Herzliya. They had one also that's as much as I remember.
Okay.
They kept sending me, we would work around the clock.
Sure.
3 8-hour shifts.
Yep.
For 5 days, and then we get 2 days off.
And what would you do in those 2 days? So you were actually considered machal, is that correct?
Machal, right.
You guys had a club in Tel Aviv.
Machal, yes.
The Machal Club.
And I used to go there.
I heard
every time I had coffee.
I heard some wild stories about that place.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did.
never saw anything.
Just,
No harassment.
No, not that, not that. Just, guys coming there for a day or two.
We used to go there
play cards.
every time.
Yeah.
Every time we had free time. It was opposite Mugrabi.
Yeah. Machal.
Yes. That's where the Americans used to hang out.
And the South Africans.
Right.
No?
Well, some of the ones who were sent to America stayed there, but some came back. By the way, the Lebanese try to separate the Americans from the Israelis. There were Israelis that got a notice, they were studying in the States, to return.
And they were on that ship also with you guys, yeah.
And they would not be separated, which I thought was nice.
Now, do you remember, you're already in Israel in June 1948 when the Al-Qalena happens.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I remember I heard there was a ship and I went to see it. It was still burning.
Yeah.
And I figured out what happened. And I must tell you, to this day, I've seen there's a movie,
Sure.
there was a show,
Sure. Documentaries.
I've thought about it. I cannot understand how anybody would do a thing like that. I was here. I know there were 600,000 Jews living here. I don't know how many young people were in the army. We'll say 1%.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have bullets for their guns. That's a fact. And we lost 6,000 young people. That's the best. That's the future. So I don't understand how anybody could shoot at a boat that was full of munitions. I cannot understand it. I can only understand it when my husband wrote a book about the Warsaw Ghetto.
Yes, I know.
And he wrote, and at a day when they were sending thousands of Jews every day to Treblinka, they knew what was going on. Everybody knew that they would not get together at a time like that. They were saying they wanted to be the head of it, this one wanted to be the head of it, this organization. I said, if at a time like that they behave like this, I cannot understand these people.
Was it a big slap in the face to you?
I couldn't understand it. There are things I don't understand. Too stubborn. There's Ben-Gurion, he was so stubborn. And then it was the Alazarov case. They said the Jews killed Alazarov.
Right, that was much earlier, but yeah, they said. So you remember that affair, the Altalena, you remember it
Yes.
happening? Yeah.
I remember it, and I never understood it.
So,
And I knew people on it
Sure.
who went back to France. They didn't come back.
yeah.
They said they were Jews who had survived the Holocaust. And they said they're not coming back to such a country. And they said they didn't like the welcome they got.
Can't blame them. So when you're in the army, you're not really having your affiliation with, you're in the war effort, you're working.
I'm in the IDF.
Yeah.
So
Now, do you have any contact with Beitar while you're in the army, or are you just?
yes,
Yeah.
because
I mean, they told you to go into the army, basically. That's what they said to
Yes.
you. Go into the army?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So you did that?
I did that.
Yeah.
Then people started coming in all kinds of ways. Beiturim from the States. And there was a group formed, and then they decided, I didn't decide anything, to go on Hitcheshvut, to start a settlement.
Is this after the army? Are you at the war?
No, I'm in the army.
You're in the army, okay. And
Yeah.
where's the Garin Hitiyashvut? Where?
First we went to Ramat Raziel,
Mm-hmm.
a thriving community now.
Yes, very
I
much.
should have bought a migrash there. Never think of those things. And then we decided to start our own settlement because we wanted to be on the border. And we started Mevoat Beitar with a group of Beiturim from South America
From South America.
who really came. We really came in the middle of our lives. I mean, I did. But they really came with furniture. They came to settle. They were a little older. They came to settle.
They were messing around.
And we didn't understand each other. They didn't know Hebrew. And I by this time, I was learning Hebrew. But we knew English. So we two groups got together. And I'm still friends with some of them.
What was it? Where was the place again?
Mevoat Beitar.
Where is that exactly located?
That is in the Jerusalem hills, but it's like one. If you think of the hills like this, it's one group of hills further toward the Arabs. It was right on the border. Husan was the next place. The name of this place was Ras Abu Ammar.
Okay.
Before the Arabs fled. And Husan, they still remained, so this was the border.
And how long
So they used to come over every night and steal. Then they didn't come and kill. By the way, there was a military government here that they made, that Ben Gurion
Yeah.
did. So then they didn't come to steal, but when we went out in the morning, we could see their cigarettes butts
Yeah.
still smoking
Yeah.
with the Arab.
Writing on it. And
They killed after we left, they killed 6 young men
when
there.
did you leave?
We left after a year and a half. First of all, I got married there. Or I think I got married in Ramat Razia.
Tell me where you meet your husband.
I knew him from Beitar,
In New York?
but we weren't.
In New York.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we weren't. We went out on dates, but we weren't.
You just knew each other.
We just knew each other.
Okay. And then you re-meet him here.
I came
And
the first.
you were here before him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was in the army, and he was on missions. He was the head of Beitar, and he was always he was in Tunis, organizing the Beitar there and all over.
So where do you guys meet? In Israel?
Yeah.
During the war?
Well,
Or after?
I was in the army.
Yeah.
I'll show you something.
Wait a second. I have your microphone. Sit
Oh.
down. You'll show me.
I'll show you after.
What did you want to show me?
A picture.
Okay, you'll show that to me right after.
Yeah.
We're almost done, and you'll show me.
Okay.
So tell me about how do you. First of all, what I want to ask you. What are your parents thinking right now? Your mother and father back in New York.
My mother was so angry at me. She didn't. My father came on a visit. My mother didn't come for 3 years. She was so angry at me that my teachers were calling her and everything. She couldn't take it. She said, I have nothing against Palestine, but I want you near me, and I want you to have an easy life.
Yeah.
V'yesh mashu b'zeh.
Of course.
What would a mother say?
Exactly. Isn't that legitimate for a mother to want for their child?
And then she said to me, many years later, she said, you know, you were very honest. Because she saw I was the only one who went of the girl. She said, you're a very honest person.
And your father came to visit you?
My father came right away to see where I was living. And
when your father came, had you already married Misha, or was it?
no, he came. When did he come? My father was so involved here with helping everybody, and he started the Bukovina Relief, and he had to meet all these people, and you know, there are 2 books about him. I was reading them, where they mention his name, actually. He helped families here, and he reconciled them.
What?
That's what he did when he came here. He used to run around meeting all these people that he was in touch with in New York, and they would all tell him, you have to look up this one and that one. And
What year did you get married?
1949, July.
July. So the war's over in July 49. The Independence War is over.
I wish the war was over. The war's never been over.
And where did you guys settle?
We were in Mivot Beitar.
Mivot Beitar. Okay.
Yeah.
And then after Mivot Beitar?
After Mivot Beitar, we rented a room in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a job.
What was your job?
I worked in a lab.
Okay.
And he's an engineer.
Right.
But he was having trouble because of his background in Beitar.
Okay.
Would you believe it?
I know many stories of that. Yes, of course. It was very...
He's an aeronautical engineer from MIT. I don't think they had another one. They didn't have another one. No, he went back. I'm sorry. He wasn't an aeronautical engineer yet. He was a mechanical engineer. But he went to Caltech when we went back, and he did a master's degree there. But when he was here, he was a graduate of MIT. I don't think they had another graduate. And they were giving him trouble with, with the security clearance. Would you believe that?
Because he was in Beitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not the reason we went back. We just didn't have, I was expecting a baby, and we didn't have any place to live. And
so you guys go back in what year do you go back?
We went back in 1951.
Okay.
And we stayed in the States for 6 years. Moshe did a master's degree, Caltech, and he worked. And then they asked him from the Technion if he would start the aeronautical engineering faculty. So we went right back. And we went to Haifa, and we lived there 7 years. And it's a good thing that they have that faculty. That's all I can say.
Yeah. That's true.
They sent other people to study.
Yeah.
But he was the only one that actually worked in industry in the States.
And what about you? When you're in the States, back in the States, are you studying or?
No, I'm living with my in-laws.
Okay.
And
Where do your in-laws live?
Riverside Drive.
Where's that?
Riverside Drive.
In Manhattan?
Yes.
Okay.
And I was going to college at night.
So you were back at school?
I'm a school person, that's all.
There you go.
So I used to leave the baby.
With your in-laws?
I had in-laws at night.
Yeah.
After supper.
Did you go back to Hunter?
Yes. I went at night.
And
For how long, I don't remember. We didn't live there too long.
Okay.
Because then he got the job at Curtis Wright.
Okay.
I'm all mixed up.
It's
we
okay.
we went to California and we came back, and he got a job at Curtis Wright. Always with the thought that we're going back to Israel, and Israel didn't have an aeronautical industry yet, and. We came back in, then we had an apartment in New Jersey, I remember, near the plant. And we came back when they
Opened up the department.
they changed, the Technion moved from downstairs to the Carmel.
Yeah.
They had money. So then we came back, and we lived in the Carmel we lived up there for 7 years. And then the IAI decided to make a plane, to build a plane, when they built the first Israeli aircraft. So then we moved here. We've been here ever since.
So that's why
he worked at IAI.
Because you're at the Tasiya Avirit, which is just down the
Yeah.
road. Yeah, okay.
So he was in Tasiya Avirit, and then when he went to the Knesset, the party was in Tel Aviv,
Right.
the Likud, and the Knesset was in Jerusalem. So we stayed here.
Yeah.
We've been living here ever since. We lived here all these years.
Muriel, my dear, is there anything that you would like to add that you think maybe we forgot to talk about or to mention about the War of Independence, or something that happened to you during the War of Independence that we didn't talk about, or anything?
Well, I admire, first of all, when I came and I went around the country and I saw the Arabs, I never believed they would not ask for peace. When I saw the conditions they lived under, I couldn't believe that there wouldn't be peace here. Because there wasn't that antagonism that the terrorism and all this. Maybe there was in the 30s, I don't know, I didn't live here. And when I came, there was they were under military law.
Right.
We have a lot to give them. But look at the way they act toward each other, what they're doing to each other. And look at this country, it's a miracle. It's a real miracle. And everybody says it's not a miracle, it's hard work. Okay, it's hard work, but look what we've done here. What you can do in a desert. There was some outstanding people. I think the people are outstanding. I admire the Jewish people, I must tell you. Only one thing I can't understand, the way they're always arguing with each other. I don't understand. That was not true in the United States. I had a different picture of our people in the United States.
I'm sure.
I saw how they helped each other. The immigrants helped each other. The families helped each other. Things are different now. The families are living all over. Not the same.
Okay, Muriel, we're gonna end our interview. There's a picture that you wanted to show me.
Yes.
Right, but let me just take your microphone off so that you don't. I want to thank you very, 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 very much for telling me your story and having
Thank
me.
you.
I appreciate it. And I told you it wouldn't be too long, and it's good. But is there
I don't know
anything-
what I said. So many things happened. First of all, I was lucky. My grandmother had a brother here and 2 sisters. And one of the sisters had no children. And she was just like my grandmother. She took me into her home.
Where did you live?
She lived in Tel Aviv. And it was such a family here. I'm still on very good terms with them.
Good.
So I was lucky because
You had a security
I'm not much of an adventurer.
You had a security net. You had a...
I'm not much of an adventurer, and I'm very close to my family. I come from a family like that. And the fact that they were here and they were the same people as they were in the States, they were just the other siblings, and they were such nice people. That was my experience. I was lucky.
Okay.
Family, because they all started coming to visit me. And they used to come, my aunts and uncles and everybody, and they saw the family here. and it brought everybody together again. I've been here for many years, but that was my experience. It was lovely.
So that's you on the bottom, correct?
That was a convention.
And that's Misha right above you.